Here I'm with Brian Shonat, the AVP. I forgot the A when I put my notes together of business development for Goodroot. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me on today.
Well, I appreciate you coming down. I know you guys have your big event down in Austin where you're doing some internal meetings for the week, but I really appreciate you and your company helping logistically schedule this. You're down from Grand Rapids, Michigan, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Awesome.
So flew in this morning. Long
Started
day.
your day like 2:30, you said, something like that?
Yeah, 3:30 Eastern time, so 2:30 Central, but we're making it. Then I got to fly down after this to Austin. So
yeah, you got a crazy day. So we'll get the podcast in. You're going to leave and then go back on another flight down to Austin. But really excited about getting a chance to talk to you today for a couple reasons. One, obviously, we're going to highlight this sort of agnostic consulting arm that you guys have, or what you guys do to help people vet PBM solutions, so vet the right pharmacy solutions for employers. There's something, specific condition that I think that you have. I don't want to say suffer from because that's inappropriate, but a condition you have that I think is going to be relevant to this conversation today. But before we go into those things, I'd love to hear a little bit more of your backstory, if you don't mind, where you grew up, what you studied in school, family stuff. Let's get to know you a little bit better.
yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin, Midwest boy through and through, suburbs of Milwaukee. So basically where I grew up, there's more cows than people, or at least there were. It's blown up now, so there's
people
a lot.
People are coming back strong.
People
right?
are coming back. But grew up in the Milwaukee suburbs, went to school on the west side of the state, small school, University of Wisconsin La Crosse. Definitely did not go to school for insurance. I think I'm one of the many of us that didn't think they would ever end up.
I think it's like 99% of us.
Yeah.
Like I've had a couple people on the show that literally studied risk management and like they knew they wanted to go into insurance. I'm like, you're insane. But most of us just sort of accidentally got into this industry, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, I started my career after college at a small technology and services company, and one of my accounts actually was HSA Bank. So started off, being an account manager for them. They were interested in me because I did a good job servicing them. They were growing like crazy. So my first foray into, health insurance was working on the, consumer-directed healthcare side, and then went to a startup with some people that left HSA Bank, Lively. I'm not sure if you've heard of them.
I have heard of them. I don't know much about them, though.
So just like HSA Bank, consumer-directed healthcare, very focused on technology, focused on the end user, very much so into the investment side of the HSA business, and wasn't looking to leave, but decided I was going to take a phone call from a recruiter one day, and they called me about Goodroot, and rest is history.
So what year was this? When did you join Goodroot?
I joined Goodroot in January of 2021. So I was also one of those folks that got to start a job during the pandemic where I didn't actually get to meet anybody in person.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably started when we were almost completely virtual at that point, right? Or your company, but even the economy was still basically remote only. So how long did it take before you actually got to meet most of your coworkers?
It was, I think it was 3.5 months, almost 4, yeah. So I went on site for the first time at the end of April in 2021. So all my training, all my onboarding, meeting the rest of the team, et cetera, was done remotely, which was a unique experience.
Yeah.
But it worked out well.
You have the conferences in our industry now. I've noticed that where I've known somebody virtually for like a year, right? And then you develop an actual relationship. You probably Zoomed with them, you message them on LinkedIn and stuff like that. And then you finally meet them and you're like, I know you. It's like we're meeting for the first time, but we're already friends, which is kind of an odd experience, but also kind of fun too, because it shortcuts a lot of the, the development of relationship that you would do in person if you're only seeing somebody once every 6 months or something like that. You actually get to know people. That's part of the reason why I like to podcast is I get to spend a couple hours with folks like you and get to know you and develop a relationship on and off camera, which is pretty cool. I want to go back to your startup world though. So I want to hear your experience because I started with PlanSight when we were still in probably what people would consider startup mode. Big difference from coming from a big company like Amwins or Sun Life to go to a startup. So when you were at Lively, like what stage of startup what were you in and what was kind of the experience of early days like?
Yeah, so I'll back up even a little further. Didn't mean to rush through that.
No, that's okay.
So when I was at HSA Bank, I was there for almost 2 years before I got into the sales capacity. And so when I got into sales, there was only one route for me to go, and that was to move. So my wife and I were in Milwaukee, and she gave birth to our first child. And so when I got promoted into sales, we moved with a 2-month-old out to the Mid-Atlantic.
Okay, what
So,
part? You said Virginia area or something
yeah,
like
Charlottesville,
that? Okay.
Virginia. So lived in Central Virginia, covered the Mid-Atlantic.
What were
So
you selling? Is that for Lively or
that was HSA Bank.
that was HSA? Okay.
But I kind of like consider that my own personal like startup situation because being 28 with your firstborn, 2 months old, and your wife, we just hightailed it out east.
Did you know anybody out there either?
No.
I mean, so you basically just completely started over, right?
We started over.
That's cool, man. It's scary though.
It was. You know, luckily, my wife's sister was she had ended up doing grad school an hour away, so we ended up having some family in the area, but we didn't see her that much. And then,
And you said this was also your first sales job at the same time, or
yeah, first
Okay.
like outside sales, first job calling on brokers.
so
know,
you
consultants.
basically just got thrown off the ledge and went into the deep end because I mean you moved, 2-year-old, wife with you, don't know anybody, and I'm going to be outbound sales for the first time. So, God, what was your life like? I mean, was it pretty hectic?
Yeah, especially because I didn't realize how much travel was required for the job.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's one of the things they tell you, but until you've actually traveled 75, 100 nights a year, you don't know what that's like, and you don't know how that impacts your family. So, when I went out and started doing it, it was a positive smack in the face, but it was a very big like, wow, like this is real life for us. So, that was a really good experience. We had a great time out east, but we quickly learned, we didn't want to be away from family. We loved the Mid-Atlantic. There was some real amazing people we met and some awesome places to visit that we never probably would have otherwise, but we wanted to get closer to family.
Okay.
So when, the guy that I previously worked for at HSA Bank reached out to me and said, we're starting this technology HSA platform. It's state of the art. Are you interested in doing it? First question was, can I get, closer to home? And so that brought us back to Michigan,
Cool.
Where my wife's sister is. So, part of going to Lively was also, a personal reason. But
So totally. I mean, you forget sometimes, and I think employers are like becoming more aware of this, although it's not like it's shocking to anybody, but your employees have lives, right? And you have
Totally.
other things that are going on that might actually impact your career decisions or might impact your work performance. And so if it's difficult from a personal level to be in a new place and be able to manage that while doing your job well, sometimes just going back to a place you feel comfortable physically would probably lead to better performance as well, I presume, right? And it's just the peace of mind of knowing where everything is and that you're close to people. So was it I presume it's a pretty positive transition when you guys went back, right?
it is, yeah. And I mean, honestly, I'd be reluctant to say a lot of it wasn't, geared towards giving my wife help.
Of course, yeah.
I'm on the road 75 nights a year, and she's, home with our daughter. That's a lot of stress on her. So helped her out a lot, helped me out a lot. Helped me. The years we were away, though, like can't take those back. It developed me professionally.
Well, it's
in a
almost
way
like
I
you went through a
couldn't.
rite of passage, right? Not only fatherhood
Absolutely.
as well, but a rite of passage with going in a new place and starting a sales job. I mean, you really buckle down and have to figure things out if that's your circumstances. So sometimes you need that good kick in the pants, for, like you said, from a career and a personal perspective. So flash me forward then to Goodroot, because I want to start there. And then actually, no, before we do that, let's talk about what I alluded to earlier, if you
Sure.
don't mind. You have the condition known as hemophilia, correct? And I know
I
you okay. So, and it's like not like the big reveal, but I think it's really interesting. And you were very gracious about being willing to discuss it. And I wanted to layer on, some context of why I think it would be relevant to the conversation. And
Sure.
I'd really want to hear from you. Those of you that know me in the stop loss world and are in this world at all understand that stop loss carriers, oftentimes that is one of the conditions that is on a list of conditions to be concerned about. Oftentimes lead to lasers, right, because of the medication that is sort of long-standing that you have to take. So that becomes a pretty prevalent condition in my industry to be aware of. And so when you told me that was the case for you, I'm going, wow, I actually would love to hear from a person who's experienced it, what life is like, understanding the financial component. So why don't you talk to me about, even if you will, go back to the when it was diagnosed and how you found out, and maybe were you young and how you coped with it. I'd love to hear
Sure.
kind of the whole story, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard the laser joke before. So
Yeah. And it's not even a joke, but
not
I'm
even
like,
offended.
I'd hear about this all the time, and people just think financially, oh, it's going to be expensive, and we're worried about this condition. this is the first time I had a chance to actually talk to somebody that has it. And so I also want to hear from your perspective what it's like sort of living with it, and then knowing you work in our industry, so you kind of understand the concerns that people have financially about it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's a genetic disorder. So my 2 uncles have it. My mom and her 3 sisters are all carriers. It's not that we need to go into a genetic lesson, but it's recessive X gene.
Okay.
So because my mom is a obligate carrier, females are XX, I have a brother who does not have hemophilia. So he was given we'll say the good X, right? So he doesn't have the recombinant bleeding disorder that I do. I was given the hemophilia gene. So actually it was diagnosed at birth. So both my brother and I were tested. They knew it was running in the family. I have a daughter, so she's an obligate carrier just like my mom. It could get passed on to her son if she has, children.
Wait, so your daughter was not afflicted, or are you saying that females don't get afflicted with the condition?
They can.
Sure I understand. Okay.
So it's rare, but again, not to go into the genetic side of things, but like for the most part, most females that have hemophilia have 2 X's that have the recessive gene.
Okay.
But there are cases now, I forget the term for it, but females with just 1 X that have the Hemophiliacs can actually develop hemophilia.
Okay.
So my daughter could, in theory, develop hemophilia because she has the gene. But as of right now, her blood levels are stable and whatnot.
Well, and for those of you, maybe the people that are listening that don't know the condition, right, that maybe aren't experienced or haven't been exposed to it before, maybe just heard of it, could you briefly define even what the condition is and what sort of the things that you have to deal with or concerned about on a daily basis? Yeah.
So it is obviously it's a bleeding disorder, but it's an internal clotting disorder. So a lot of times, people hear that and they're familiar with the term. Like people know hemophilia. It's often the royal disease. I think a lot of Russian royalty had it, and there's like plenty of books about it. So I think that's like the nickname for it. But a lot of people hear and they're like, oh, so if you get like a paper cut, is that going to be like the end of your day? It's nothing to do with external bleeding. Okay. So it's all bruising. So yeah, basically if I get punched in the arm or get in a car accident or something that normally you would bruise from, I would bruise very heavily from. Okay. And so I need to, infuse myself with factor VIII to help stop the bleeding internally.
Helps it coagulate? Is that the correct term? Okay, yeah. And so then does that preclude you from not being able to play sports or, contact sports, if you will, or or do you just risk it? I mean, like out of curiosity, I mean, it's got to alter quite a few of kind of what we would consider a behavior that most people would just sort of take for granted. So like kind of what did that, growing up, what was that like? And
yeah, so my boss is obviously going to listen to this, and he's probably going to shake his head at this story. So my mom is a nurse practitioner. My family had it. So like I was not a typical hemophiliac. Okay. I'm still not. Played hockey growing up, played hockey even after, high school and college until earlier this year. Okay. My hockey career ended this year because of a internal bleeding injury that we don't need to go into the details of, but it was a good time to hang up the skates.
Well, is your boss shaking your head because he can't believe you were still playing, at this point? How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I turned 34 next month.
Okay, yeah. So it's about time I hung up my soccer cleats beforehand, but, it's natural to eventually have to hang them up anyways. But so did you have like a scare? I know you said you don't want to go into details, but did you have sort of a pretty severe crash or something with a collision?
Yeah, I did. So I collided into the boards, and I had to have emergency surgery because I ruptured blood vessels on my kidney and adrenal gland.
Okay.
So,
and I appreciate you talking about this, and obviously I think it sort of undergirds maybe some of your career decisions. But the reason why I wanted to address it is because it often, again, comes up in purely financial terms. Totally. And people go, wow, well, this is going to be $700,000 a year. And what if there's complications, and they're almost fearful from a stop-loss carrier perspective to even take on that risk, right? They may exclude that risk. They may add a laser of some substance in order to offset some of that risk. So you have to then understand, right, that that's going on and balance that with what you understand an employer has to consider, right? Like, so talk to me about kind of the dichotomy of there's the interpersonal stuff, right? The human element with the financial kind of decision-making process and things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that honestly, as a patient, I didn't truly understand until, so my dad is a VP of FP&A for a software company. And when I was growing up, that's when, hemophilia drugs started to get, they were taking off. Specialty costs for drugs was going through the roof. And I remember, as I got older, my dad started to complain more and more when I got injured. And he wasn't doing it, in like a mean way, but it was just like, he's getting crushed at work because people are like, dude, your kid is killing our health plan right now. Like he is 50% of our spend or something. And so like, it didn't really click to me until I started working in insurance. And then I, realized how much of the cost of the drug goes to the plan. So yeah, it's a bit of a, like you said, it's a dichotomy, because the part of me is like, I wish everybody could get as much help as possible, but there's not, there's solutions for everybody out there, but they don't help everybody equally as I would say, like, how can they help the plan?
Yeah.
So, specialty copay assistance dollars only go a certain way compared to manufacturing assistance dollars, but not everybody qualifies for manufacturing assistance dollars. Making a patient who's comfortable with their physician, I've had this conversation 20 times probably.
Okay.
Where, XYZ physician or the drug I'm on, from a prior auth perspective, there's a cheaper option, but that doesn't necessarily mean the like efficacy of that drug that they're trying to push me on based on the formulary is right for me.
Yeah.
So I've gone through all the, not the loopholes, but all the, the things that, is designed to help drive down cost. And I've pushed back on that as a patient.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I'm helping an employer group with their plan costs and I see a member that's going the route that's the most expensive to get their infusion, it's also like, I can help you out there. There's a better way to do that.
Well, there's an opportunity, right, in the margin
Absolutely.
there. I mean, from a business perspective, and that's what I think entities, all they're trying to do is sort of be able to absorb that cost, but also ensure that, their members and their dependents are safe and healthy and all those things. But they're looking at a bottom line impact and going, how do we actually address this? So curious, did that drive your interest in this space? I mean, I have to believe it did a little bit, right? This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com.
Yeah, so I mean, when I got the call from the recruiter, I wasn't looking to leave Lively. It just happened out of the blue. But, I took it, I think it was, a slower time of the year. And as soon as I started talking about like pharmacy and, going into specialty and driving down trend, it just clicked.
Yeah.
A lot of people would say it's, serendipitous.
Yeah, maybe it was meant to be a little
Exactly.
bit. Yeah.
No, and I totally believe that because, I really enjoyed my time in the consumer-directed healthcare space. It got me to where I am, but nothing has really clicked as much as, working for Goodroot and just the things that we do, how I can personally relate to it. And yeah, I mean, every single day, at least every week, I have a conversation with, XYZ consultant or a TPA or a client that's, hey, we have this new hemophiliac on the plan. And it's not just hemophiliacs, it's cystic fibrosis, rheumatoid arthritis, you name this, specialty condition. But I have a personal, connection to always just hearing like, all right, let's solve that.
Well, and oftentimes I'll try to dig into somebody's why, right? I'll dig into what, why do you do what you do? And every once in a while, like in this situation where it's pretty obvious, right? What sort of motivates or inspires you to do what you do. So let's go ahead and use that as a segue now into the Goodroot conversation.
Sure.
So why don't we even take a little bit of step back and go, what is Goodroot? I don't think I probably did it full justice of explaining it, so I'd like to hear it from you, and then that will sort of precipitate the rest of our conversation here.
Yeah, so Goodroot is a community of companies dedicated to reinventing healthcare systems for good.
Okay.
So that obviously that means a lot of different things, and that could go a lot of different ways. So the community of companies, Goodroot is the umbrella, right? And so there's a number of different entities underneath it that have different areas of focus. So part of our organization is more focused on, medical side of the house. But, just speaking about it at the high level, it's all a bunch of healthcare visionaries that are coming together that are trying to, as we say, reshape healthcare systems for good. And so that has naturally evolved into having, quite a few different aspects to it.
Yep.
And so I sit on the commercial side of the house, which is really where we have our, roots Goodroot
Yeah.
in the space, but we do have a whole other side, that I'm not on that team that's, working on, the Penstock, Breeze, Emory, more so, patient steering, working with providers to make sure that, the TPA is, and, payment integrity.
Payment integrity.
Payment
Okay,
integrity.
yeah,
That's the word I was looking for. So that's an entirely different team, but I am on the commercial pharmacy team, which focuses on two main products, which is CoeoRx and AlignRx.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, we were joking off camera, which I know you guys are dealing with this internally too. Just sort of being able to align and be able to explain the different align. Oh yeah, I didn't do that intentionally, but the different products, right, and services, and make sure people understand it. So I want to kind of give you kind of free reign here, if you will, to position the CoeoRx solution and explain what that is, and then the Align team. What's the difference? When do they each sort of work solo, or do they work collectively? Would you kind of unpack both of those, and then that'll steer us for the rest of the combo?
Sure. So I mean, just for anyone that's curious, we do work tangentially, right? So the two are not meant to be considered separate parts of the organization. We do work hand in hand. They just have slightly different, product alignments, or not product alignments, but segments, if you will. Mm-hmm. So AlignRx obviously was the first part of the organization, the true consulting arm.
Okay.
And so when we started going down the path, we started seeing that, specifically talking about pharmacy, the RFP process, broken is not, the right word, but in a lot of cases it is, especially for groups that are going self-funded for the first time. If you're a 200 life group and, you have no leverage, you don't have any access to your data, nothing that you can base, a proposal off of, you're literally just getting an off-the-shelf quote.
Yep.
When you go into the space, or you're bundled, with your provider on an ASO platform, and you have no leverage in trying to, push that. So we eventually started pre-negotiating these deals into what we call Coeo. So Coeo offers employers choice, leverage, and savings, that they normally wouldn't be able to get. Mm-hmm. So looking at it, over the years, if you're a 200 life group, you're not going to get the same pricing you would get going into like a coalition deal with us that has a couple 100,000 members under it, right? So unfortunately, in the pharmacy world, lives are leverage. So what we did is we decided to put together all these different prepackaged deals with PBMs, and use the lives that we have underneath them to give employers of that small and mid-market access to deals that they normally wouldn't be able to.
Well, that sounds like it's not too dissimilar to like a stop-loss panel, where you have a few. Are you familiar with like the panel arrangements?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of just outside perspective, I want to hear your opinion on this. But rather than one single entity perhaps having a little bit of stop loss, they might engage a GA, which a general agent would say, hey, we've got all this leverage because we have all this premium. Or the big enough brokerages will have their own panel where they get a limited subset of the carrier market to agree to better terms and stronger contracts.
Yep.
In exchange, of course, there's probably an override arrangement as well as an agreement. Hey, we're going to try to place X amount of business with you this year. It's kind of a give and take arrangement. So these coalitions seem to, it sounds like, in my opinion, seek to kind of accomplish the same end, is give people the ability to access scaled type pricing and contracts that they might not get on their own.
Correct. And it's just a very efficient way to go to market. So, traditionally, again, the RFP process takes months. And, that's not to say it's a bad thing if it's the right situation. But normally groups are getting their renewals, especially nowadays, they're getting them later and later in the year.
Yeah, oh yeah.
If you have 45 days to make a decision, you're going to have to go, quick as possible to get into your PBM arrangement. So basically, we created the tools in the system behind boiling down all the confusion that you normally see in the PBM space into a digestible format for employers.
Okay.
So with Align and Coeo in tangent, again, we created a system called Neuro. So our repricing tool has it's just a tremendous tool to allow people that don't understand. We're saying PBM, we're talking in all these acronyms that people don't understand, right? It's just natural being in the healthcare space. Well, a lot of people don't understand, how do you break down formulary disruption? Mm-hmm. How can you financially show, what the impact is going to be to the plan if you go from, this PBM to the other, open formulary to closed formulary, XYZ, you name it, right? So neuro really breaks that down into, like I said, digestible or, layman's terms for people to understand the numbers. And it's also quick.
Okay.
So if you have 3 days to make a decision, everything is pre-negotiated, these deals. They're vetted. We renew them on an annual basis. And as we get more and more lives into them, the deals get stronger and stronger. So, you're a group going self-funded for the first time. You go into one of our Coeo deals, it's going to be much more, strong of a deal compared to what you would get off the
Pareto
shelf.
principle, right? You're going to get probably 80% of what you probably should have gotten, but there's an immediacy to it. Like you said, they're kind of predetermined, pre-vetted solutions. Doesn't mean it's perfect, right? Like if you'd had more time or maybe the group was willing to take 6 months to come up with the best possible solution, you might get closer to that 100% perfect product. But that 80-20 principle, when applies to most businesses when it's a decision-making process. If it does the majority of the things that we need and it is a dramatic improvement over the current situation, then you don't need to spend 6 months trying to come up with the absolute best solution there is in the world.
Correct. And I mean, we spend all year making those deals stronger and better and putting more solutions into them. So, I mean, we're constantly, evolving it and making it better. And what's unique about Coeo is it's a fluid coalition. So a lot of our competitors, you'll see them, they're working with either one PBM or, 2 or 3. Okay. And they try to just pack as many lives into them as possible, get the best deal. And it's not a wrong approach. It's not a bad approach. It's just limiting, right? So we have 9 PBM contracts that we work with in Coeo because looking at a group, pharmacy is not one size fits all. You could have a really young population where working with a, one of the big 3 where, strong economics, not a whole lot of, specialty solutions out there, but based off their utilization, that really maximizes the savings for them. You could have another group where you have to have a strong specialty solution, that a mid-market PBM, would offer you that you can't get with one of the larger ones. That's going to drive down costs. So what we did is we put together what we consider as, full spectrum solutions for our members and our clients that, they can use to get as good of a deal as they want.
Well, I would say if you're like me and I don't live in your space, but there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of PBMs, and how do you parse the benefits of one versus the other? And everybody's promising transparency and all these things. And, that's even, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear from your perspective what a transparent PBM is and why that might be better. And is that term even being sort of overutilized, or is it just a buzzword that you hear a lot?
So I'm not going to discount any transparent PBMs, but yes, it is a buzzword that is 100% overused. Because a simple question just to, ask anybody is, all right, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, we're transparent, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are you transparent about? Well, we pass on 100% of rebates. And then another follow-up question that has what is a rebate? What's a rebatable drug? So, the other piece of, both Coeo and Align is, contract terms and conditions are way more important than the numbers. So we have this conversation every day with, people that aren't versed in this, and the pharmacy, space wants you to think this way. Look at the AWP discounts. Look at the rebates. Mm-hmm. That's what your focus should be on. Well, I could show you a chart of different, discounts, brand rebates and say which one is better. And the answer is you don't know, because, what is defined as a rebatable drug on this PBM solution versus this? How do they, market multi-source brands versus single-source generics, et cetera? So really, the strong terms and conditions are what defines, our contracts as being good. But going back to the transparency, that's something that we often have to battle.
Yeah.
That's something that we're often with brokers going back and pushing on, because the employers, we're in a transparent design. It's 100% pass through. Well, yes, they are passing on 100% of what they agreed to.
Okay. Yeah.
But they only agreed to pass on what, we could pass on, an additional 10% of things that they didn't agree to. So it's a little bit of the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, it's kind of some smoke and mirrors to a degree. I mean, the way that you were describing the rebates sounds very similar to when a Buca carrier says that we've got the best discounts, right? And then so they get you focused on the percentage of the discount. but you ignore the fact that the charges are much higher, right? So it's always
Correct.
a discount off what, right? Bill charges. Well, what are your bill charges? I don't know. Let's bill them and see. So you never really know exactly what the cost is going to be. And that's what I always look at words like that get thrown around, like transparency. Everybody's pushing transparency. The CAA is now requiring certain elements of transparency, but anybody can say they're transparent, and that doesn't really, like you said, mean anything, or you can unpack to what it really specifically means. So how does that, though, differ from like what we consider a traditional contract, a PBM contract?
Yeah, so a transparent design, in just at its simplest terms, means there's no spread pricing going into it, and they're passing on 100% of generic discounts, as well as rebates earned. And the only way that they should be making money is off of, disclosed fees. So if there's an admin fee, whether it's on a PMPM basis or a per claim, what they charge for prior authorization, utilization management, et cetera.
Okay.
So that's a transparent design in its simplest form. And then a traditional design is you are accepting the fact that the PBM is going to mark up, generic spread pricing.
Is the spread pricing why there's such a big opportunity for employers to save money? Is it just spread pricing, or are there other elements that are kind of building fat into the equation? This podcast is sponsored by PlanSight. PlanSight is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansight.com.
Spread pricing is one of them. Rebates, obviously, and then just hidden things.
Yeah,
that you
like
don't
what other
know.
kind of hidden fees are out there that you see pretty commonly?
A lot of people, have caught on to these, but over the last few years, like multi-source brands, right? So PBMs don't want to, put a multi-source brand drug in their formulary because they would much rather get a higher rebate from a drug that doesn't have as many competitors. Or a single source generic, oftentimes. So when a drug goes from its patent stage to being a generic, it's a 20-year patent life, there's this initial 6-month period where the first generic alternative that comes out from that drug is, it has like a 6-month, safety window for whatever reason. I don't know who just established that, but
Yeah.
anyways, typically when that first generic comes to market, or single source generic, its AWP discount is significantly lower. So a lot of PBMs will try to exclude, single source generic drugs from their generic pool because, if your retail 30 is running, AWP minus 82, and then you have a single source generic that is running at AWP minus 40, that's going to drastically offset. And, in order to meet your contract guidelines or, terms, you have to have that generic discount be that certain tier. So there's a number of different games. Another big one that we're seeing is carving out specialty. A lot of PBMs are not allowing it, or if they do allow it, they're saying, okay, either you're going to pay a carve-out fee, or we're going to take your specialty rebate guarantees from 95 or 100% down to 60%, or they might completely just take them away altogether. And specialty is really the big piece that people are focused on right now. There's a ton of fat, if you will, in the space.
It's relevant to the conversation. I was just telling everybody, you guys off camera, the Joe Rogan episode that I listened to this morning, actually yesterday and this morning as well, because they're long, and I get that you can't get 2.5 hours of a podcast on in one sitting. But the guy he had on was from Ways to Well. I think his name is Brigham Buller, if I'm saying that correctly. But he was talking about this specific thing. Like, he used to be a drug rep. He was talking about kind of the Wild West early days of being a drug rep and how much money you could make, and then how you wind and dine. He had like a $17,000 a month expense account that he had to spend on these doctors, so it was really just so much money was pouring into the marketing of drugs. OxyContin was one that came up in that conversation. But I think it's pretty good. And from my perspective, obviously I have 1/1,000,000th of the audience of Joe Rogan, but if 10 to 20 million people are listening to that, and for the first time they're actually discovering what a PBM is. They're discovering what spread pricing is. He talked about that. Some of the dark underbelly, if you will, of the PBM world and even the insurance world, the kind of the average Joe audience of Joe Rogan, meaning they're not insurance people like people here,
Sure.
Are getting exposed to that. I think that's a really good thing. We're talking about a little more technical version of that, but I think it was fun to hear somebody with an audience that big have a person on to talk about almost this exact subject. So where do we go from here in terms of like, what things are people missing, like from a cost containment perspective? Like if I'm an employer, or if I'm a broker that has a lot of self-funded employers, what are the things that I'm missing and I'm not looking for that I need to be aware of today?
Yeah, so I'd say the big thing that a lot of people are just missing, in the self-funded space in general is they're just overlooking pharmacy. 10 years ago, pharmacy used to be 5 to 10% of the overall spend, and now in a lot of cases it's become almost 50%, or could be 50%.
Yeah.
And so, our consulting team, AlignRx, which I didn't, get much into talking to, working with a pharmacy consultant like them is really having, a pharmacy expert at your disposal that's helping you mitigate all these different solutions.
Okay.
So, Coeo really helps groups, with that prenegotiated deal.
And how
aspect.
many vendors or PBM partners would be in the Coeo coalition?
So there's nine PBMs, and there's a variation of different specialty partners that each PBM works with.
Okay.
And so our consulting team, AlignRx, is the one who's vetting those solutions.
Okay.
Making sure they're.
Does that same Align team have access to those 9, or do they have a broader potential swath of PBM partners?
So we can work with anybody,
Okay.
right? So we're just using Coeo as like, not a market check, but like a first
pass,
stance.
if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's quick, choice leverage savings right there for groups. But, in the event that a larger RFP is needed, doing a deep dive into a new claimant that came on board that, it's a, new claimant that you have no idea, like what, I got this question yesterday from a broker, like, I've never seen this drug before. I don't know what it's for. I sent it to our consulting team to say, like, can you help me investigate this? What is this? And they came back and, they're helping me, figure out a solution for this specific piece. So I'd say what employers in general are just missing out on is the opportunity to save money. Mm-hmm. Not accepting the status quo, or, thinking, if we change PBMs, there's going to be so much disruption, right? People are going to complain about this when, it could 30%, 40% savings could be, upwards of $750,000.
Yeah.
Could be millions of dollars.
Could be millions of dollars for sure.
Well,
didn't you tell me, you were telling me a story with an employer recently where I think something like $6 million of savings were projected over 3 years. I mean, there's substantial dollars that can be affected just by better decision-making process. And that's what you guys are geared around, right? And I didn't want to prevent you from being able to fully elaborate on the Align team, right? But so what does it look like if I'm engaging that team who's really going farther in the weeds on evaluating my plan spend and my current arrangement to look for a better one?
Yeah, so I mean, they're just going to be the main driver behind it, right? So they're going to be the one helping you. We're completely agnostic in our approach. So yeah, we have these pre-negotiated deals, but we can go to any and all PBMs. And one of the ways that's really hard for employers to, get help in this space, where our, consulting team excels, is if you're locked into like a bundled deal. So, you alluded to it earlier, a lot of the BUCAs have, either they own their own PBM or they partner with one PBM only. And it's very difficult or impossible in a lot of cases to actually break out from that solution. So in the event you're an employee group and you're with, one of those carriers, and you're unable to leave XYZ PBM because it's their solution, or there's a $10 carve-out fee, we actually have the ability to go in and negotiate with that PBM. So the group doesn't get a penalty.
Oh, okay.
They're not leaving the PBM, they're staying as is. And actually we have this unique approach in market that, a lot of PBMs know us as like the friendly consultant, because our goal isn't just to carve the group out. Mm-hmm. If that's the right solution, if it's the best path for them and it makes the most sense, we're absolutely going to do that. But our goal is to remain agnostic and just help, every employer out in the best way for them.
Well, yeah, and if you stay agnostic, then you remove some of your own biases, right? If you look at a group and go, well, you definitely should be carved out, and here's why, but they go, well, here's why we don't want to be, or here's why we can't, or here's the financial constraints of doing that, or maybe there's political reasons behind the scenes where relationships exist. So you have to work within the constraints that they present to you, and if you are being too forceful about it, then it feels like you're no longer sort of operating on their behalf, you're operating on your own interest. So I like that you use the term agnostic. That's the position we take at my organization, PlanSight, with our carrier partners, is we have no influence on the outcome of an RFP. Whatever the group and the consultant decide is best for them, that's their decision they make, and we don't care. We just want to facilitate the transaction.
Yep.
So I think you guys have a similar kind of philosophy and approach to the way that you're approaching PBM and spreading it and making those comparisons more digestible. That's what we're trying to do sort of en masse across the benefit types. So what do I need, since we're on the subject of RFP, if I'm a consultant and I'm gathering the data set required to come to you and say, hey,
Sure.
take a look at my employer, my client's spend. What are the types of things that I'm gathering that I need to present to you in order to get started?
So the PBM contract, obviously, that's the first and foremost the most important piece, and if not the most important piece is the data file, right?
Okay.
So we can work in tangent, either with the data set or the PBM contract. But what's unique about our solution too is we'll always take the utilization from the group to reprice it.
Oh, okay.
So we're giving you an apples to apples comparison. So I could tell you all the data fields we would need, but
you don't have to go through the line items, but just kind of the big picture.
Yeah.
You mentioned the PBM contract, but what if I'm fully insured? Do I still have an example of my PBM contract, or is that
No.
something that's broken apart? Okay, so let's use that instance, that use case. I am fully insured. What are you going to base the analysis on then at that point?
Yeah, so at that point, literally what we would do is we would compare our contract for you compared to maybe a quote you got on your own. And a lot of times it's a hard piece to really break down for people, because if they've never gone through the PBM, we'll say RFP process or experience, they're going to do exactly what I alluded to earlier. I'm going to look at AWP discounts, and I'm going to look at rebates. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a step back and say, but there's no exclusion language. There's nothing that, look at the termination language. You have 3-year contract window with a 3-year evergreen. You have to give 180 days notice. There's a lot of ways PBMs can force you, into terms that you don't want to.
Yep.
So, at that point, it's really breaking down the actual contract itself. It's really hard to predict spend when a group's going fully insured to self-funded.
Mm-hmm.
We have had success with some of these new data companies out there, Deerwalk, Innovu, Springbuck, where groups that are fully insured have access to that data. And if that's the case, then we can break down for them, this is what it would be, in our deals, or, what you would get if you were going to go into, a contract with XYZ PBM, and your utilization was the exact same, right? So that's what we're basing it off of. If we can get that utilization file, it is an apples to apples comparison. It's not looking at, the average, 35-year-old male only fills 3, scripts a year. And typically they're generic scripts. So we're going to save you all this money.
All these really broad assumptions.
Exactly.
So that actual running through of the claims and repricing them. So you're actually if you have the access to that data, you literally take the exact claims dollars that they've experienced and reprice them through the coalition, through the CoEO contracts? Through Neuro. Okay, cool. And so you could go, all right, well, hey, if you had to use this contract with this PBM, $300,000 of savings, and almost to the T. I would presume it's pretty close, the accuracy of that projection. So that's hindsight, but at least gives them an idea in the future what they could expect as a percentage of savings, correct?
Yeah, so it's a breakdown of if your utilization was the exact same, which we know utilization is going to change.
Yeah.
But if you were on this contract and this member filled that drug at that pharmacy on that date, at that day supply, that milligram dose, etc., this is what the cost would have been. And then it breaks it down, like I said, in layman's terms. And every time we run into this, people ask us why do you lay it out this way? And the reason that we lay it out in columns so that you can see it all in one simplistic view is that you're looking at it from one lens, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not looking at this PBM's analysis compared to this one. They don't lay formulary disruption the same. They don't list the contract terms and whatnot. doesn't explain all those details. So,
well, it's kind of repricing it somewhat in a vacuum, right?
Correct.
You're right, which is not necessarily going to replicate the real world experience, but
Correct.
hey, how else are you going to reprice it? At least from just a straightforward apples to apples comparison. It makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to something that we kind of skipped over, but I know this is a hot button issue in our industry,
Sure.
especially we were talking about self-funding, is specialty medication. And you mentioned specialty carve-outs earlier, but everybody seems to be scared of specialty medication and also genomic type therapies as well, or
Sure.
gene therapies. So because just the price tags are so freaking huge. So what are we doing there? Like, what can I do if I know I have a large percentage of my spend is in specialty, and maybe it's one or two medications and they're very high dollar? How am I addressing that if I'm an employer?
We're on a mission to partner with the most innovative companies in America to fix health benefits, one plan at a time. NavMD has created a blueprint that delivers world-class benefits to 155 million Americans. Better benefits starts with data intelligence. Our platform is empowering the next generation of advisors to zero in on opportunities to optimize the plan, build the right team, implement proven strategies and solutions. Join us on our journey to revolutionize health benefits. Let NavMD put you a step ahead.
Yeah, so you have to go down the path of curiosity. You have to investigate it, and that's one of the biggest issues that we're seeing from employers right now, is that they're afraid to evaluate that because in a lot of ways, these solutions can be, quote, disruptive, but they can also keep your business from sinking. So when you look at specialty solutions, I'd say the big hot button right now is like J-codes. So a lot of people are talking about J-code injectables, medical injectables, or what people call them. So that's an actual infusion that needs to go into somebody's body, done by a medical professional. I have a J-code medication, but I self-infuse.
Okay.
So a good example of this is looking at a partner that can take a member that's currently going to a hospital for an infusion. Is there a way for them to get the drug, delivered to their house so that it doesn't hit the medical plan, and then find them, a clinic that will do the infusion for them at a much lower cost? So that's one example of, the solutions that we help employers find. Another big one is manufacturing assistance.
Okay.
So it's a term that people call, sometimes it's specialty assistance program, manufacturing assistance, patient assistance. They're all synonyms, but that's when a member can actually qualify for the drug to be paid for 100% by the manufacturer of the drug. It is it's a harder route to go down because a lot of manufacturers have, you have to have a certain household income, right? So you have to qualify for it. Not everybody does qualify for it, but if you do, it's oftentimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. And so, really evaluating those solutions, and more importantly, evaluating a PBM that's willing to work with you on those solutions,
Right,
is where people need to go. Because a lot of PBMs don't allow, for these third-party vendors to come in and do this because there's very high, rebate dollars on these specialty drugs. So it is important to look at the big picture. And yeah, I mean, it could be one member like, Brian Shonat, who's, filling hemophilia medication that's, $1 million a year.
yeah.
But if that member qualifies for it and it's a 20...
Well, there are government programs too, right? Where people can qualify. Is that the manufacturer's assistance, or there's a different pool of dollars set aside for government assistance programs, right?
They all kind of work the same.
Okay.
It's just how you get the dollars from the manufacturer.
Yeah, the important part is you need to have somebody that actually can guide you to those and know
Correct.
how to actually, manage through the process to apply and become eligible to do that. But like you said, there's significant savings potentials in doing so if a member does qualify. Aren't there other ways too to source drugs overseas or externally? Like, what are those? I think that's what script sourcing does, if I'm not mistaken. But some entities, like I think Sharks is also similar as well, where you can source medication from an alternative area of the world or whatever. So how do those work? Yeah,
international filling. So there's a lot of different Sharks, script sourcing, CoeoRx, PriceMD. They'll ship the drug from Canada or Great Britain or the Cayman Islands. prior to COVID, PriceMD was actually, it was called, what was it called? Healthcare tourism, where they were actually flying people to the Cayman Islands for their injections. And it was significantly cheaper than
that's the wild thing is you go get to have like a 5-star vacation, right? Once a quarter or whatever, pick up your medication and go home. And that's still cheaper than getting the medication on shore. Like that's wild to me.
Yeah. The profit that pharmaceutical manufacturers in America make just in America subsidizes the entire rest of the world.
I'm glad they're letting us foot the bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, and which again probably speaks to the inspiration why you're in the space too, just from financially, right? Because that is a component of this. That's what we're ultimately talking about. Is like this is on an unsustainable trend.
Correct.
Especially with all the new, very high price tag orphan drugs that are coming out that are, at unsustainable $3 million, $2 million price points. You're going, how are we supposed to absorb this into our economy without something that sort of helps us pivot? And you guys, your component of this is to steer people to better contracts, better PBM partnerships, better understanding just of their plan in general so that they know what they're buying. I mean, exposure, whether sunlight is the best disinfectant, that's literally the first place to start is awareness to this. And so I'm happy that we got to talk about it. I want to kind of shift towards the end, if you don't mind, and we'll close things up here with a couple more questions. But, where do you guys see the coalition model evolving? I mean, this is what you do. Part of your bread and butter is this coalition style pricing. So you're going to have to continue to evolve it with the marketplace itself. So kind of what does the next couple of years look like with this coalition and the CoeoRx model?
Yeah, so I think, Coeo and Align are in a really good spot to keep growing because as, like I said earlier, the coalition is fluid. Mm-hmm. So we've had PBMs that were in the coalition that, their model no longer fit modern day. Mm-hmm. So we no longer, carry them in place. We've had others join that we're like, wow, we're really impressed by them. From some of the RFPs we've done through AlignRx, we want to market them. We think they're doing a really good job. So our job is to stay on top of that every single day. We're constantly looking at different solutions, different PBMs that come out. But I think, it's an interesting conversation because sometimes people are like, well, you have too many PBMs in your coalition to like really get the benefit. A true coalition model is like I said, working with one PBM and trying to just get as much leverage as you can in that. But the main tenets that we're really trying to stick to with both Coeo and Align is choice, leverage, and savings that for employer groups align for better outcomes.
Well, I would disagree with the notion that a coalition should be one. I think that's kind of nonsense because, I mean, again, coming back to my sort of myopic perspective on stop loss, but if I've got 4 stop loss carriers or 2 stop loss carriers in a coalition, I might get 100% declines on a number of cases. So I don't have a diverse enough subset of partners there to be able to take on certain risk profiles or certain size groups or fully insured takeovers. So the notion that you should have 1 or 2 on a coalition seems to be a misconception in my opinion because you don't have enough diversity of risk profiles and entities willing to help with certain situations. You need to be able to go to the 8th or 9th one on the list for certain circumstances because they're the best fit.
Exactly.
It's the philosophical question: when does it become a heap of beans? If you put a bunch of beans on a table, when's it actually a heap? I remember this as a college kind of a thought experiment. But it's also like, what's the right number for a coalition? Is it 5? Is it 10? There's no exact number, but it's probably somewhere between 1 and 100 or whatever. And so I think you just need enough partners to where there's trust. They do their job, right? Like sometimes, like you said, you have to interchange some of these that aren't doing their job or the contracts no longer align. But if you don't have enough to partner with in each unique circumstance, then you're really not offering much as a consultant.
Exactly.
If that's the case. You're just basically a wholesaler shopping for one entity or 2 entities and bringing them distribution.
Yeah, and that's why our model, it just works interchangeably because, if we've solely focused on the coalition, we would be blinded to this new PBM that, our AlignRx team comes to us and is like, hey, we just had this awesome result from this. You guys should be interested, in talking with them. So because the two, we work hand in hand with each other, I think it's a really great approach that is set up for the long term to help employers, even as the the market evolves. Like the way PBMs used to make money 10 years ago, it's a really interesting chart. Like it's drastically different than it is today. It used to be more heavily on rebates and spread pricing, and now it's, you know, specialty, admin fees, et cetera. So we have to stay on top of that. We have to constantly evolve with that. And so that's
you have to be able to
approach.
also catch where the new hidden fees are and go,
Yeah.
aha, gotcha. Yeah, there's I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the future of PBM, but I would be remiss. I know we talked about this off camera earlier. Pharmacogenomics, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Right, that guy Brigham, again, on Joe Rogan's podcast brought it up. And it's the first time I'd heard about it. Can you explain what that is and what the intent is behind this testing?
Yeah, so pharmacogenomics at the highest level in layman's terms is testing a drug's like literal efficacy and how your body reacts to it. So you could take a drug and, you know, based off your biological, I don't understand all of it, but like your DNA, this specific drug doesn't work as well for you for XYZ reason.
Okay.
Your biology could work better with XYZ drug instead. And so
it's almost like a genetic predetermination or a guess of how you're going to actually be impacted by a drug, good or
Correct.
bad, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And they're doing that through a blood test or a swab test? Like, do you know like how the actual...
I think
he said a swab.
yeah.
I think he said a swab, but I'm not. It's just it's you know, it seems like kind of futuristic sci-fi, if you will, a little bit. But I know gene therapy is obviously a part of you know, a buzz in our industry as well. So it makes sense to be able to look at somebody's genetic code or their sequence and go, hey, I think this drug would interact this way is our best guess. It's probably not 100% accurate. I presume it's not, but what if it gave you an idea of how you would actually benefit or to your detriment to take a certain drug? So maybe you make a more informed decision on the front end instead of just throwing it in your mouth or injecting it in your body and going, well, let's see what happens, right?
Well, it's interesting. So ironic story about that. I can relate to pharmacogenomics because I actually was sent incorrect medicine once.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I injected myself with what I thought was cogenate FS, recombinant factor 8, and that was actually Jivi, which is a newer hemophilia 8 recombinant factor. And I was like, wow, like I feel like Superman. Like my bleed's like going away.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
You're
instantly.
like watching it like disappear.
It's like evaporating from
Yeah,
my body.
yeah.
Sorry. And 2 days later, I get a call and they're like, you got to ship your factor back. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, there's a recall. We sent you the wrong factor. And I'm like, this is actually the best thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Like, what was it?
Like, keep sending it to me, please. Yeah.
And everyone, you know, that I spoke to was like, please, like, you know, we're not interested in like a lawsuit. I hope nothing like bad happened. I'm like, this is amazing. So, from a personal perspective, I've actually thought about this. Like, why did I react better to Jivi?
Mm-hmm.
Why was it more effective to me than cogenate FS?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big thing for hemophiliacs. You can develop what's called like an inhibitor. So your body like just will straight up react or will negate the effects of your drug, and then you have to switch to another one, or you have to do all these other realms of therapy. So I think pharmacogenomics and gene therapy are like they're really great for you know, these solutions. But you know, we were talking about it earlier today too. There's a business side to it. Like I understand both. I would love for the factor 8 hemophilia gene therapy to come out, but it's going to be probably $3 to $5 million when it hits the market.
Yeah.
So I understand.
You got plenty of time to save, man. Yeah.
Exactly. Not every employer is just
I got to ask you a follow-up. The Jivi drug, did you say they pulled it off market, or it was
no,
recalled?
I take it still today.
I was going to say, so you by accident discovered a drug that you actually benefited from, right? So that's what it sounds like the pharmacogenomics is trying to prevent, is the trial and error or the wait and see. Hopefully they can predict a little bit more accurately how you would interact with the drug, or maybe, hey, so a new drug comes on the market and we think you'd benefit from this one, so let's try this one. But there's an intelligence applied to that rather than just guesswork.
Yep.
So I know we probably talked for about an hour, man, and I think we probably could talk for an hour more. But you've got to travel, and I've got to get on to something else as well. So last but not least, Brian, why don't you just give me your kind of closing thoughts? I mean, what if I'm listening to this and I'm a consultant or I'm an employer and I want to know kind of what next steps are? You know, what is your sort of call to action, if you will, for somebody listening to the show?
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier, but you know, be curious and just don't accept the status quo, especially if you're either considering going self-funding for the first time, or if you are self-funded and you haven't looked at your PBM arrangement. You know, reach out to us. There's always something we can improve on. This industry, it's not designed to entry be easy. Like, it is meant to be difficult. It's confusing for a reason. And so, working with an expert that is going to help you in this specific field, we're happy to be in this space because, most employers are happy accepting a single digit, increase in their renewal, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of status quo. If you can get it from double digits to single, it's amazing. Well, we're giving employers 20 to 30% decreases. So, we can really be the antithesis of what is normal in the market. And we're specifically, just working on pharmacy. So reach out to us.
Very well said. I'm not going to say anything else in addition to that, man. Very well done, Brian. Well, nice to meet you. Thanks for traveling in, and good luck on your next stop down to Austin here later today. But really appreciate you, man. It's been a pleasure, and hope we can do it again soon.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. Check them out at truecaptive.com.